Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The grave was not dug with care or prayer. It was a rushed, vicious cut in the land, a shallow wound carved into the frozen, unyielding soil of the Oregon woods. When Elowyn Pike came upon it, she did not see a burial. She saw cruelty made physical. One dark, dirt-smeared hand broke through the loose earth, fingers curled tight as if reaching for air that no longer existed. Every instinct urged her to turn back, to mount her horse and ride hard for the lonely safety of her homestead. Yet something deeper, older, refused to let her flee. The same stubborn will that had carried her through widowhood and isolation held her in place. She knelt and began to dig. She could not know then that by saving this stranger, an Apache man left to die, she would uncover a truth powerful enough to destroy the memory of the husband she mourned and ignite a reckoning that would burn them all. The autumn of 1875 spread across the Cascade foothills in muted golds and rusted reds. For Elowyn Pike, the beauty offered no comfort. It was her second autumn alone since her husband, Baird Pike, had been killed, and the falling leaves only mirrored her own still, unresolved grief. Her days had become a rhythm of endurance. Repair the fence, check the snares, split the wood, sit by the fire and stare into the flames, remembering a life that no longer felt like her own. Her ranch stood as a solitary marker of settlement, pressed against the vast and lawless wilderness stretching toward the California borderlands, land still scarred by the memory of the Apache conflict just 2 years earlier. Suspicion lingered in the air. Settlers imagined threats behind every tree, while the remaining Apache, scattered and hunted, remembered only broken treaties and rifle barrels. That Tuesday, a sharp wind cut down from the peaks, carrying pine resin and the promise of snow. Elowyn was tracking a deer, her Winchester resting easily against her arm. Baird had taught her how to read land and movement, how to follow silence as much as sun. "You have to be tougher than the territory itself," he said. Once his voice had been full of certainty. Now it echoed hollow in her memory. She was passing through a stand of dead ponderosa pines when she noticed it. The earth was disturbed. Wrong. Not the work of a bear or badger. The shape was rectangular. Human. Fresh, cold fear crawled across her skin. This had been Apache land, or what remained of it. And it was land men like Mercer Drawl, whose cattle empire pressed against her modest holding, were always trying to claim. Violence here was never far from the surface. Her thoughts jumped to the circuit judge found robbed and murdered along the Klamath Trail the previous spring. She advanced carefully, rifle raised. Wind whispered through the trees like a warning. Then she saw the hand. Dark, lean, caked with soil, fingers locked tight. For a breathless instant she believed she was staring at the last reflex of a corpse. She stepped back, heart stalling. Then the fingers twitched. They loosened, tightened again, weak, frantic, a silent plea. He was alive. Reason demanded she walk away. Whoever lay beneath that soil had enemies, powerful ones. Enemies who had buried him and would not welcome a witness. He was likely Apache. And men like Mercer Drawl had taught the region that the only good Apache was a dead one. Bringing him home would invite ruin. The sheriff in Linkville, Hollis Keene, was known more for paperwork than courage. He would be no help. But Elowyn did not see an Apache or a settler. She saw a human being suffocating in the dark. She saw the same merciless finality that had taken Baird, the same uncaring hand of the wilderness. Something unyielding rose within her. The resolve that had kept her from selling her land and running east She dropped to her knees, discarded the rifle, and clawed at the ground with bare hands. The soil was frozen and jagged with stones and pine needles, tearing her skin raw. Her breath came in harsh bursts, driven by effort and fear. What if they are still watching? She uncovered a shoulder, then a face. He lay on his side, cheek pressed into the dirt. A deep gash split his forehead, blood mixed with soil. His hair was long, black, unbound. His features were strong, high cheekbones, a proud jaw, slack only from unconsciousness. Buckskin trousers clung to his legs. His chest was bare. Old scars crossed his torso, layered beneath fresh bruises. A length of rope hung loose around his neck. They had not even bothered to kill him first. They had buried him alive. His breathing was shallow, uneven. Panic and resolve warred inside her as she cleared the last of the earth. He was tall, solid with muscle, and dragging him free cost every ounce of her strength. At last he lay motionless on the pine needles, a man hauled back from the edge of death itself. She felt for his pulse. It fluttered weakly beneath her fingers, thin as a spider's thread. He was alive, only just. She could not leave him there. Whoever had buried him would return to finish what they started. Taking him into town would mean a slower execution under the cover of law. The Linkville doctor was Mercer Drawl's cousin, a man known for his hatred of Apache. There was only one choice, reckless and dangerous beyond reason. She had to bring him home. She fetched her horse and, with a strength born of panic, hauled the unconscious man across the saddle, draping him there like a sack of grain. The rescue was awkward, brutal, stripped of dignity. But it was rescue all the same. Every groan of leather, every snapped twig on the ride back to her cabin sounded thunderous in the suffocating quiet. She searched the trees constantly, pulse pounding, waiting for the flash of steel or rifle barrel. The forest remained still, watchful. When she reached the small, solid cabin Baird Pike had built, she dragged the man inside and lowered him onto the cot beside the hearth. When she locked the door, the weight of her choice crushed down on her. Lying on her floor, within the walls that held both grief and refuge, was a near-dead Apache, a man hunted by someone's law or someone's vengeance. She had unearthed more than a body. She had unearthed a secret. And she knew with bone-deep certainty that her quiet, solitary life had ended. He lingered on the edge of death for 3 days, hovering between worlds. Elowen Pike became his unwilling, fearful keeper. She cleaned the gash on his forehead and stitched it closed with the steady precision learned from years of repairing tools and clothes. The same needle that once mended Baird's shirts now closed torn flesh. She washed the dirt from his skin, keeping herself distant, methodical. His body told a story of violence and survival, old blade scars, marks that might have come from bullets, and newer bruises darkening his chest and back. He was powerful, even in stillness, shaped by hardship and conflict. Who was he? A leader? An outlaw? Or simply a man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? Fever took him, shaking his frame as he muttered in a language she could not understand. The sounds were harsh and rhythmic, swelling into desperate cries before sinking back into whispers. At those moments, Elowen's hand would freeze on the pistol tucked into her apron, wondering if she was nursing danger back to life. She fed him broth, lifting it carefully to his cracked lips, and kept the fire burning high, battling the cold that seemed to seep from him. The cabin, once her refuge, became a cage. Each branch against the window sounded like hooves. Each gust of wind carried imagined threats. On the 4th day, the fever broke. Elowen woke to find him watching her. His eyes were dark, sharp, impossible to read. There was no gratitude in them, only caution, deep and unyielding. He said nothing, only followed her movements with steady focus. The silence unsettled her more than his delirium had. "You're awake," she said, the words sounding too loud. She held out a cup. "Drink." He sat up slowly, muscles straining, accepted the cup, and drank without breaking eye contact. He was weak, but strength was returning beneath the surface, like a wounded wolf, cornered, dangerous. "Who are you?" she asked, keeping space between them. He did not answer. "Who did this to you?" Silence pressed harder. Fear and frustration tangled inside her. "I saved your life. I pulled you out of the ground. I could be killed for hiding you." Still nothing. "The least you can do is tell me your name." He looked away, gaze drifting to the rifle above the hearth. Baird's rifle. His jaw tightened, barely noticeable. He remained silent. 2 days later, hoofbeats approached the cabin. Elowen's heart lurched. She signaled urgently. He moved with startling speed for a man so recently near death, slipping into the shadows behind stacked firewood. Elowen smoothed her apron, steadied her breath, and opened the door. Mercer Drawl sat astride a magnificent black stallion, looking down at her with a polished, possessive smile that set her teeth on edge. He was well into his 40s, silver threading his hair, eyes pale and cold as winter sky. He owned half the county and acted as though the rest already belonged to him. He had never hidden his desire to buy Elowen's land, the only parcel with a year-round spring. "Mrs. Pike," he said warmly, too warmly. "Fine, sharp morning." He dismounted, expensive boots sinking into the mud as he stepped closer. "Mr. Drawl?" Elowen Pike replied evenly, keeping her voice cool. "What brings you this far out to my place?" "Just checking my fences and my neighbors," Mercer Drawl said, smiling without warmth. "Making sure folks are safe. There have been reports of Apache stragglers from the war stirring trouble near the lake." He paused deliberately. "We're forming a posse to sweep the area. Can't be too careful." His gaze slid past her shoulder, probing the dim interior of the cabin. "You're alone out here, Elowen. That isn't safe. My offer for this land still stands. A fair price." "I'm not selling, Mr. Drawl. Baird Pike built this place for us. It's my home." Drawl's smile tightened. "Baird was a good man." "A real loss," he said smoothly. "Killed by savages. That's why vigilance matters. If you see or hear anything for your own protection." The warning lay beneath the words, sharp and unmistakable. He wasn't asking. He was claiming ground. "I can take care of myself, Mr. Drawl," Elowen said, her voice harder than intended. His pale eyes held her for a long moment, measuring, calculating. "I'm sure you can," he said at last. "Just remember, some troubles are bigger than one person." He swung into the saddle, tipped his hat, and rode off. Elowen shut the door with steady hands, her body trembling not with fear, but with rising anger. She turned toward the corner of the cabin. The Apache man stepped out of the shadows. The blank mask he had worn was gone. In its place burned raw, unfiltered hatred. His eyes followed the direction Mercer Drawl had taken, dark with intent that made her breath catch. For the first time, she saw more than a wounded stranger or a threat. She saw purpose. That evening, as Elowen sharpened a skinning knife by the fire, he finally spoke. His voice was low, rough from disuse. "That man," he said. "Drawl." She looked up. "What about him?" He met her gaze, and the warning in his eyes was unmistakable. "He walks a crooked path. He fills the ground with lies and bones. He's powerful here, Elowin said carefully. Power built on graves collapses to dust, he replied, his words carrying a strange, solemn weight. He is why I was buried. He and his dog. His dog? She asked. A man with snake eyes, he said. The one who tied the rope around my neck. He looked down at the floor. Draal is searching for something. Something he believes my people possess. Cold dread slid down Elowin's spine. The visit had not been neighborly. It had been a hunt. And now, she realized, he's hunting you. She straightened. You need to tell me who you are. Her voice was quiet, firm. I deserve to know the name of the man I'm risking my life for. He studied her for a long time, weighing her fear against the steel beneath it. My people call me Aion, he said at last. I was a chief. A chief. The word landed heavily. Elowin had not saved a common fugitive. She had sheltered a leader of the very people settlers had waged war against. One of those leaders sat only feet from her now, both judgment and plea in his presence. The war is over, she said uncertainly. Your leaders. They were hanged. The war never ends when your land is stolen, Aeon replied flatly. Not all of us chose blood. Some of us chose peace. That choice made us enemies to our own young warriors and earned no trust from your soldiers. We stood between two storms. He spoke carefully, each word placed like stone. He told her of his people, those of the Hot Creek region, who tried to live quietly near the marshlands, keeping distance from conflict. Neutrality was never allowed them. They were hunted by the army, betrayed by rival bands, and crushed by settlers like Mercer Draal. An unspoken truce settled over the cabin. By day, they worked in silence. Aion, his strength returning faster than expected, helped where he could. He wrapped the loose handle of her axe with leather, making it stronger. He showed her how to braid rope so it would not snap under strain. He moved with quiet certainty, as if the land itself had taught him how to endure. He moved with a restrained, deliberate grace that made Elowin Pike's constant motion feel awkward by comparison. In the evenings they talked, or rather, Aeon spoke and Elowin listened, her long-held assumptions about the Apache people breaking apart with every quiet sentence. He did not speak of raids or bloodshed, but of seasons marked by the return of birds to the lake, of stories his grandfather had told about how the world first took shape. He spoke of his wife and his son, taken not by war, but by the coughing sickness that swept through his camp the winter before. In return, Elowin found herself sharing her own loss, speaking of Baird Pike in ways she never had before. She spoke of his restless ambition, his energy, his hunger to build something lasting. He wanted to build an empire out here, she admitted one night, staring into the fire. He said this land belonged to anyone bold enough to claim it. She told him how Baird bought the property from a prospector who had gone broke, calling it the foundation of their future. Aion listened, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he remained silent for a long while. This land does not wish to be taken, he said at last. Your husband did not ask. A flicker of defensiveness rose in Elowin. He was a good man. He worked hard for everything we had. Hard work is not virtue when the ground beneath it is rotten, Aeon replied. The words were not an accusation, only a fact, unyielding as stone. They unsettled her, planting a doubt she could not easily dismiss. One afternoon, beneath a low gray sky heavy with the promise of snow, Aeon stood studying Baird's rifle above the mantel. He did not touch it, but his eyes traced its length, the polished stock, the brass fittings. "This is a fine weapon," he said. "A Sharps Model 1874, a buffalo gun, made for distance." Elowin nodded. "Baird prized it. He said he won it in a card game in Sacramento." Ion turned to her. "You said he was killed. How?" The question was blunt, and the memory struck with sudden force. "An ambush," she said softly, her hands tightening in her lap. "Sheriff Hollis Keene said it was an Apache raiding party. Baird and another man, a trapper named Remy Calder, were scouting a mountain pass. They found him by the creek, an arrow in his back. His horse and rifle were gone." "The rifle was gone?" Ion repeated sharply. "Yet it hangs here." "Mercer Drawl returned it," Elowin said. "He claimed one of his ranch hands bought it from a trader in Wairika weeks later. He recognized it and brought it back to me." Even as she spoke, the story felt too neat, too convenient. Drawl was not known for unprompted kindness. Ion's eyes narrowed. "Drawl," he said, the name bitter on his tongue. "He returns a rifle yet covets the spring. He offers comfort, but his shadow stretches far. You must be careful, Elowin Pike. You see a grieving widow. He sees an obstacle." The warning chilled her, but what followed was worse. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "The man who put the rope around my neck, the one with snake eyes. I have seen him before. Long ago. Near a creek in the mountain shadows." Elowin's blood turned cold. "What are you saying?" "He rode with another man," Ion continued. "A large man, loud, carrying a Sharps rifle like that one." Her breath caught. "They were not scouting a pass," he said, his eyes burning. "They were meeting one of my people. A man named Olan. A man willing to sell his soul. They were searching for something." "A map," he said, letting the word hang. The room seemed to tilt. A loud man, a Sharps rifle. It described Baird perfectly. "No," Elowin whispered, shaking her head. "He wouldn't. He was a rancher." "He was more than that," Aeon said with grim certainty. "And his death was not the work of my people." "The arrow," he continued. "Apache fletching is made with goose feathers bound by sinew. The arrow shown to you, the one taken from your husband, was bound with turkey feathers and plain thread." "A white man's work," he said quietly. "Made to look like ours." Elowin stared at him as the world she had lived in for 2 years fractured. The official story, Drawl's timely return of the rifle, his relentless offers for her land, the convenient Apache arrow. The pieces began to form a pattern that made her stomach turn. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would anyone do that?" Aeon met her gaze. His eyes held a deep, steady sorrow, not for himself, but for Elowin Pike. He already knew the answer to her question, and he knew it would break her. "Because of a confession," Aeon said quietly. "The confession of a dying man. That is why they buried me alive. Not to kill me, but to silence me." He drew a breath. "I am the last living person who knows what truly happened the day your husband died." The truth did not come all at once.
Over the next 2 days, Ion spoke in pieces, each fragment torn from him like shrapnel pulled from an old wound. Telling it hurt, not only for what he remembered, but for what he was doing to her. He was dismantling the ground beneath her life. He began not with Elowin, but with the land. Not her small holding, but the high mountains beyond,
a jagged spine settlers called the Devil's Backbone. To his people, it was known as the place of whispering spirits, a sacred ground where for generations Apache vision seekers had gone. "It is not a place for greed," Ion said softly as they sat by the fire, the cabin sealed tight against fresh snow. "The earth there is rich, but not with the yellow metal your people chase." He looked at her. "With white metal." "Silver?" Elowen whispered. "Yes." She stared at him. "There's no silver in these hills. Prospectors have searched for 50 years. "They searched rivers and valleys," Ion replied. "They did not know where to look. The vein lies high in a narrow cut behind a waterfall. The secret is known only to the chiefs of my band." "We do not mine it," he said. "To take it is to bleed the mountain." But the secret had been betrayed. "An Apache named Olan," Ion continued. "His spirit was broken by the war. His family starved. He came to believe the old ways were lies and that only white wealth held power. Olan chose to sell our soul." He spoke the words with quiet contempt. "He made a bargain. He would lead 2 white men to the cave. In return, he demanded gold enough to leave this land and live as a king." "2 white men," Elowen repeated, her voice hollow. "Yes," Aeon said, meeting her eyes with grim pity. "The loud one with the sharp's rifle, your husband, Baird Pike, and the quiet one who planned everything, the man who owned the valley." Mercer Drawl. Nausea rolled through her. It felt impossible. They had been neighbors, nothing more. Drawl had offered condolences, called Baird a pillar of the community. Yet as Ion spoke, forgotten moments snapped into place. Baird's sudden trips to buy cattle, the late-night arguments she had overheard, the extra money he sometimes carried, explained away as winnings from cards. "They were partners," Ion said. "Drawl had the power and the buyers. Your husband had boldness and the trust of his neighbors. Olan was their key. He drew them a map on cured deerskin." Ion and his warriors had been watching. They knew Olan was a traitor. They suspected he was meeting whites. They followed them to the creek, the same creek where Baird was later found. "We did not go there to kill," Ion said firmly. "We went to stop them, to take the map, to drive them from sacred ground." "They were not alone," he continued. "There was a third man, Drawl's enforcer, the one with snake eyes." Elowen's breath caught. "Catch Rollins." She knew the name. Rollins was Drawl's foreman, a silent, vicious man feared across the territory. "Drawl was not there," Ion said. "He does not dirty his hands. He sent Rollins to oversee the deal. But something went wrong. Your husband was not just a partner," Ion said. "He was a cheat." The word struck harder than any blow. "He had copied the map," Ion continued. "We heard them arguing. Rollins accused him of it. Your husband planned to register the claim alone, cut Drawl out. He pulled a pistol. Olan tried to run. Rollins shot him in the back." The scene unfolded in Elowen's mind, shouting, greed, betrayal. "My warriors and I came out of the trees," Aeon said. "Rollins saw us and opened fire. Your husband turned and fired as well. It was chaos. In the confusion, Rollins saw his chance. While your husband fought my men, Rollins stabbed him from behind, then fled into the woods." Elowen shook violently, her hands covering her mouth. "No. They told you it was an arrow," Aeon said, his voice iron hard. That was a lie. Rawlins killed your husband to silence him and to reclaim the original map. He never found the copy, Aeon said quietly. After that day, my men and I disappeared. We knew what would come next. We would be blamed. And we were. He stared into the fire. Mercer Drawl and Ketch Rawlins returned with Sheriff Hollis Keene.
They pulled the knife from your husband's back and drove one of their own arrows into the wound.
They made a story, he said. An Apache massacre. The cabin fell silent except for the crackle of burning logs. Elowyn Pike felt hollow, as if the past she had lived inside for 2 years had been stripped away. The man she had loved, the man she had mourned, had not been an innocent victim. He had been a thief, a liar, a conspirator, killed by his own partner.
Her grief, the weight that had shaped every day since Baird Pike's death, suddenly felt misplaced, like something carried for the wrong reason.
"And you?" she asked at last, her voice a raw whisper. "How did they find you?" "I became a ghost," Aeon replied. "For 2 years I led what remained of my people, hiding in the high country. But Rawlins never stopped hunting me. Not because of the murder. He knew who truly did that. He hunted me for the other map. The copy your husband made. He and Drawl believed Baird gave it to me during the fight, or that I took it from his body." "Did you?" Elowyn asked. Aeon shook his head. "No, I never saw it. But 2 weeks ago they found our hidden camp. They came at night. There was no battle. It was slaughter. They captured me. Rawlins questioned me. He demanded the map. When I told him I did not have it, he did not believe me. He beat me. Then Drawl gave the order. They were not to hang me. A hanging leaves a body.
They were to bury me, to erase me. They left me in that hole, trusting the earth to finish what they started." He looked at her then, his dark eyes heavy with the truth he had delivered. "I have taken the memory of your husband from you, Elowyn Pike," he said quietly. "I am sorry for your pain. But you saved my life. You deserve to know the truth of the man you married, and the men who truly killed him." Elowyn did not cry. The hurt was too deep for tears. It sat in her chest like iron. Her gaze drifted to the Sharp's rifle above the fireplace, the emblem of Baird's ambition. It was no trophy. It was evidence. She looked at Aeon, the man she had once feared, and no longer saw an enemy. She saw the only other living soul who had survived that day. And she looked inward, at the woman who had lived inside a lie. That woman was gone. In her place, something harder was taking shape, tempered by truth, sharpened by anger. A woman who now had reason to fight. The days that followed the confession were charged and unsettling. The cabin, once heavy with unspoken tension, now carried a shared, dangerous understanding. Elowyn felt as though she were seeing everything anew. The pasture, the dark fringe of the woods, the distant peaks. The image she held of Baird had shattered. At night she lay awake, replaying every memory, every word, measuring them against Aeon's account. They reassembled into the likeness of a stranger, a man driven by hunger and secrecy, pulled into a fatal bargain with Mercer Drawl. Her love for him twisted into something bitter. She was no longer just grieving a death. She was mourning a life built on lies. Her fear of Ion vanished, replaced by gratitude, pity, and a quiet sense of kinship. They were two solitary figures bound together by the violence of other men. He was no longer merely an Apache leader. He was a witness, a victim, a partner in a truth that could get them both killed. Proof of that danger came quickly. Ketch Rollins began to make himself known. He did not ride up openly the way Drawl had. Instead, he appeared as a shadow at the tree line, a dark shape on a distant ridge at dusk. Watching. Elowen glimpsed him when she went to the well, when she fed the chickens. He never approached, never spoke. He only watched.
"He knows," Aeon said one morning, standing at the window as Rollins paused his horse on a rise half a mile away. "He knows I am not dead. Someone saw your tracks, or he saw the disturbed ground. Now he waits. He wonders if I am here." "What does he want?" Elowen asked, though she already knew. "The map," Aeon replied. "Drawl's greed is a fire that does not burn out. As long as that second map exists, it threatens him. Anyone could find it and stake a claim to that silver," Aeon said. "He needs the map, and he believes I know where it is." Elowen Pike's thoughts raced. "But you don't." "No," Aeon nodded. "And Baird Pike is dead. So where would he have hidden it?" His gaze drifted slowly around the cabin before settling on her. "He would not have carried it during the fight, too dangerous. He would have hidden it somewhere secure, somewhere he planned to retrieve it after dealing with Ketch Rollins." A sharp realization struck Elowen. "Somewhere safe," she murmured. Baird trusted no one, but he trusted his own land. He trusted his home. "The map has to be here," she said. "In the cabin, or somewhere on the ranch." "We must find it," Elowen said, resolve hardening in her voice. "It's the only proof we have." "Without it," she continued, "it's your word, the word of an Apache against Mercer Drawls. No one will listen." "And if we find it?" Aeon asked quietly.
What then? Do you take it to Sheriff Hollis Keene, a man who eats at Drawl's table? That would be signing your own death warrant." "Then we use it," Elowen replied without hesitation. "We expose him." The plan was reckless, terrifying, but it was the only path that did not end in surrender. She would not let Drawl steal her land and escape the murder of her husband, no matter what kind of man Baird had truly been. And so, a desperate alliance was sealed. They became hunters within their own walls, searching for the final evidence of a dead man's betrayal. Their efforts were quiet and methodical, carried out in the narrow window between dawn and the inevitable appearance of Rollins on the distant ridges. They began inside the cabin. They pried up the loose floorboard where Baird once hid emergency cash. Nothing. They combed through his few books. They emptied his old trunk filled with worn clothes and personal keepsakes, each item another reminder of the man she had not known. Elowen found the silver locket she had given him. Opening it felt like trespassing on a grave. Ione worked differently. He had patience and an eye for details she missed. He noticed that one stone in the hearth was a slightly different shade. With a crowbar, they levered it loose. Behind it lay only dust and spiderwebs. Frustration mounted with every passing day. Rollins grew bolder. He rode closer, circling the property just beyond the fence line, his message unmistakable. "I know you're in there. I'm not leaving." The pressure tightened. The cabin felt smaller, the walls pressing inward. The bond between Elowen and Ione deepened, forged by confinement and shared purpose. They learned to speak without words, with glances, with subtle movements. She would watch him repair tack, his long fingers steady and precise, and feel a sense of grounding she had not known in years. He would observe her studying Baird's old ledger, her brow drawn tight in concentration, and recognize the steel beneath her quiet manner. One evening, after another fruitless search, Elowen collapsed into a chair.
It's useless, she said, exhausted. He was clever. He could have hidden it anywhere, buried it, dropped it down the well.
Ion stood by the door, peering through the small viewing hole Baird had drilled.
Think as he did, he said softly. He loved his possessions. He was proud of them. He would not have buried it in mud. He would hide it inside something he valued. Elowen's eyes swept the room, the furniture Baird had built, the tools on the wall, and then stopped at the tack hanging by the door. Her breath caught. Not the everyday saddle. Baird's parade saddle.
A finely tooled piece with silver inlay, purchased after a supposedly successful cattle sale. Too elegant for daily use, yet polished and oiled with obsessive care.
He was proud of it, she whispered.
Ion's gaze followed hers.
Heart pounding, Elowen crossed the room and ran her hands over the leather, searching for flaws. It felt solid, perfect. Then Ion pointed to the raised cantle at the back. This seam, he said. It is different. Thicker thread. The stitch holes are uneven.
Taking her skinning knife, Elowen carefully began cutting the thread.
Her hands trembled as the first stitches gave way. It felt like the last violation of Baird Pike's memory. One final, intimate betrayal. The leather finally gave way. Hidden inside the horsehair padding was a thin, flat object wrapped in oilcloth. Elowen Pike's fingers shook as she drew it out and peeled the cloth away. Inside lay a piece of supple deerskin. Marked across it in rough, deliberate strokes was a map.
It traced creeks, ridgelines, and waterfalls along the Devil's Backbone.
Near the highest peaks, a simple X had been carved into the hide, beside a single word: the vein. They had found it, the truth, the prize, and the death sentence. At that precise moment, the sound they had feared shattered the silence. Not the quiet approach of one rider, but the pounding thunder of many. A sharp voice cut through the night air. Elowen Pike, this is Sheriff Hollis Keene. We have a lawful warrant to search your property. We have reason to believe you are sheltering a fugitive and murderer. Come out now with your hands raised. Through the window, they saw them clearly. Hollis Keene sat rigid in his saddle, unease written across his face. Behind him, outlined by a dozen burning torches, stood Mercer Drawl, Ketch Rollins, and no fewer than 10 armed Drawl hands. The cabin was surrounded. The snare had closed.
The sheriff's words lingered in the frozen air, an official sentence ending their fragile secrecy.
Elowen stood motionless at the center of the cabin, the deerskin map clenched in her hand. Its edges felt sharp as a blade. Truth, in this moment, felt like execution. They waited for this, Ion murmured, his voice low and dangerous. He slipped away from the window, blending into the shadows like a hunting cat. They let us uncover it for them. Understanding struck hard.
Mercer Drawl had not rushed. He had waited, patient, calculating. He had allowed Elowen's own home to become the forge where his prize would be revealed, then arrived with the law wrapped around him like armor.
Elowen! Keene shouted again, his voice shaking now. Don't force this to turn ugly. We know he's inside. They stole the story, Aeon whispered from the dark. His eyes had adjusted, already measuring distances, exits, angles, not as a wounded man, but as a warrior.
They need justification to enter.
Don't give it to them. Steeling herself, Elowen stepped toward the door. Sheriff Keene, what is this madness? She called. I live here alone. You're frightening me. Her voice trembled, close enough to fear to pass, masking the fury burning beneath. Before Keene could respond, another voice cut in, smooth and commanding. Mrs. Pike, Mercer Drawl said.
We have testimony. Thaddeus Crowell's boy, Finch Crowell, saw you aiding an injured Apache weeks ago.
He reports smoke from your chimney every day since.
You've been hiding him, harboring the man who murdered Olan. A lie stacked neatly atop another. They were turning her into an accomplice, a traitor. That's absurd, Elowen shouted back, her thoughts racing. She had to hide the map, but where? They would tear the cabin apart. Aeon silently gestured toward the hearth. The fire had burned low, glowing coals pulsing red beneath ash.
Destroying the map would end everything, but giving it to Drawl would doom them all.
No, Elowen whispered. There had to be another way. Her eyes fell on her sewing basket. Plain, wicker, filled with thread spools, needles, scraps of cloth, harmless, domestic, invisible to violent men hunting secrets of blood and silver. Moving fast, she folded the map tight and forced it deep into the hollow core of a thick spool of dark brown thread, the kind she used for mending horse blankets. Crude.
Fragile, but all she had. She buried it beneath calico scraps and closed the basket just as Drawl's voice thundered again. Last warning, Elowen Pike. We're coming in.
A heavy boot slammed against the door, then another. Wood cracked. They're forcing it, Aeon said, stepping to her side. In his grip was the iron fire poker, no rifle, but deadly in his hands. When it breaks, stay down, he ordered calmly. They want me alive. They won't be careful with you. The door frame splintered.
With a final brutal blow, the door burst inward, torn from its hinges. Sheriff Hollis Keene stumbled through first, pistol drawn, but wavering. Behind him, Ketch Rollins shoved past, his eyes cold, unblinking, serpent still, as they locked onto the shadows where Aeon waited. Mercer Drawl stepped in behind them, his expression locked into a mask of absolute command. Torchlight washed across his sharp features, warping them into something almost cruel. Well now, Drawl said calmly, his gaze sweeping the ruined cabin before settling on Elowen Pike, who stood rigid, guarding her secrets.
Ketch Rollins' eyes searched the room with predatory urgency, finally snapping toward the dark corner where Aeon had been moments before. It was empty. Before anyone could shout a warning, a shadow dropped from the rafters. Aeon landed without a sound directly behind two of the Drawl hands. He moved with explosive speed.
The iron poker cut through the air, smashing into one man's wrist and sending his rifle skidding across the floor.
The second man barely had time to gasp before Aeon drove his shoulder into his chest, slamming him backward into the others crowding the doorway. The cabin erupted into chaos.
Get him!
Ketch Rollins roared, yanking up his pistol. Elowen didn't think. She reacted. She ripped the heavy cast-iron skillet from its hook and hurled it with everything she had.
It struck Rollins square in the arm. His shot went wild, blasting a jagged hole into the ceiling as he cursed and staggered. That heartbeat of distraction was all Aeon needed. He vaulted the overturned table, kicked open the small shuttered window at the rear of the cabin, one no one had thought to guard, and vanished into the snow-choked darkness.
"Don't let him escape!" Drawl shouted, his composure finally shattering.
Several Drawl hands poured through the broken doorway, torches swinging wildly as they scattered into the night. Rollins, clutching his injured arm, shot Elowen a look of pure hatred before following them. Moments later, the cabin stood nearly empty. Only Elowen Pike, Sheriff Hollis Keene, and Mercer Drawl remained. Drawl advanced slowly, his fury barely contained. His eyes traced the disturbed hearthstone, the open trunk, the saddle with its sliced seam.
"So," he hissed, "you found it."
He stopped inches from her. "Where is it, Elowen? Where is the map?"
"I don't know what you're talking about," Elowen replied. Her voice trembled, but she did not step back. The sewing basket sat untouched just a few feet away. Drawl laughed, a short, ugly sound. "I misjudged you," he said coldly. "That won't happen again. You have it. Hand it over now and I might convince the sheriff to go easy on you. Harboring a fugitive, assaulting members of my posse, those charges carry weight."
Sheriff Keene shifted uneasily.
"Now, Mercer, let's slow—" "Be quiet!" Drawl snapped without looking away. His hand rose as if to strike her. A voice cut through the tension from the shattered doorway. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Mercer Drawl." Everyone turned. A man stood silhouetted against the night, older, weathered, eyes sharp with resolve. A shotgun was leveled squarely at Drawl's chest. Behind him stood two more men, equally armed. The Iron Veil holdouts.
"What is this supposed to be, Von Eyre?" Drawl snarled.
"I paid you a visit tonight, Mercer," Von Eyre said calmly. "An Apache came to me with a story about a map, a murder, and a woman about to be crushed by a man hiding behind the law." He nodded toward Elowen. "Looks like he was telling the truth." Hooves thundered in the distance. More riders arrived, not Drawl's men, but other ranchers answering the warning Ayan had spread through the valley. He hadn't fled blindly.
He had gone for help. Not from the law, from the people. The standoff shifted. The cabin was no longer the center of power.
Mercer Drawl was no longer the judge. He was the accused. "Arrest them!" Drawl barked at Keene. The sheriff looked at the armed faces surrounding him, his neighbors, men who had endured Drawl's grip for years. Slowly, Hollis Keene lowered his pistol. The illusion shattered. Seizing the moment, Elowen crossed to her sewing basket.
With steady hands, she removed the spool of thread, unwound it, and let the deerskin map fall open across the table.
"Looking for this, Mercer Drawl?" she said, her voice clear and unyielding. "Proof of your partnership with Baird Pike, and the real reason he was killed." The truth hung in the air, undeniable. Ketch Rollins lunged for the map in a final, desperate move, but Von Eyre struck him down with the butt of his rifle.
With his enforcer fallen and his men slipping away into the darkness, Mercer Drawl stood defeated, his empire reduced to a shattered cabin.
At last, pressed by armed witnesses, Sheriff Hollis Keene stepped forward and placed both Drawl and Rollins under arrest. In the quiet hours before dawn, after the last riders departed, Ayan emerged from the tree line. "You have your justice," he said softly. His voice carried the weight of survival and truth.
"And you have your truth,"
Elowen Pike answered, holding Ayan's gaze. No words were needed. Understanding passed between them like a shared scar. "I cannot remain," Ayan said. There was no sorrow in his voice, only direction. "I must go and find my people." He inclined his head once, a gesture of respect older than either of them. "Live well, Elowen Pike. You carry the strength of the mountains."
Then he turned and disappeared into the wilderness that had shaped him, the trees swallowing his form as if he had always belonged to them.
Elowen remained on the porch as dawn broke. The first light of morning spilled across the damaged door, the scarred threshold of her home. Behind her lay a past built on deception. Ahead of her stood a future untouched by lies. She was no longer a widow defined by grief. She was a woman who had faced the truth and survived it.
What rose from those ashes was something stronger than sorrow. Resolve. For the first time, her life belonged entirely to her. The story of Elowen Pike and Ayan is a reminder that the deepest truths are often buried beneath fear, silence, and blood.
and that it takes uncommon courage to dig them free. It is a story of how one act of compassion can unravel years of deception, and how an alliance forged in desperation can deliver justice where the law itself failed. Their lives were changed forever, not by the violence that surrounded them, but by a single choice: to trust each other in a world determined to tear them apart. Because true strength is not only found in surviving the wilderness, but in navigating the most dangerous terrain of all, the human heart. If this story of courage, betrayal, and an unlikely bond moved you, please help us share it. Tap the like button to let us know you want more stories like this. Share it with someone who values tales filled with grit, truth, and heart. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell. We have many more forgotten stories from the frontier waiting to be told. Thank you for listening.